Hi, today we are going to talk about this, jumping, and adding animation for jumping in particular. You follow the instructions and it should work perfectly. I have double checked it, seems okay to me, and I verified that it works. This is the code that you need to add for jumping. Basically, it may seem strange, right? So we are not really setting jumping with what we read from the input controller. Instead, basically, the fact that we are, on the ground or not, says if you are jumping. Basically, jumping is being not on the ground. They are basically the same thing from the point of view of the animator. So we still have the variable that we read from the input controller, and we use it because we need to know if we need to set the vertical speed, we need to set this variable that is used by Scivolo, the character controller, and of course we say that isGrounded is false, so that from this moment on is false. Because to jump you need to be grounded, right? But then after that you have to be not grounded. And notice that once this becomes false, this becomes true. That means that for the entire time that ln is not touching ground, this is set to true, and so the animation for jumping is played. It is exactly what we want, right? So again, we are using the input controllers checking that it is pressed when we are grounded. That means also that if we press, at least with this configuration, with this code, if we press jumping while we are already midair, nothing happens. Of course, if we wanted to implement something like double jumping or triple jumping, the code would need to be changed, but this works for our use case. Then, of course, the input controller, as usual, we need to add, the usual connections and the function. So this is the variable that we set is public, and of course we are reading it here. And then in characters, we need to add the jump speed is set to 8. In the inspector, as you can see here, if you click, let me check, let's drag and drop here ln, and if you look at the character, the jump speed is 8. Okay, so you have to manually set it, but once it's done, and then we can get the jump speed. That is what we check, what we assign here, right? We used to assign the vertical speed. And that's because velocity is essentially the x and z components are equal to velocity xz, whereas the vertical, the y component, is equal to this, right? Eventually it becomes like that. So only thing that's left to do, of course, to add jumping is a button and the space bar on the keyboard, or the south button, meaning the one below, right, on a controller. Has different names on the Xbox controller, the Nintendo controller, the PlayStation controller, but it's the one at the bottom, basically. And let me show you how it looks. Should already be used to this. As usual, after you enter these, you can press save, so this gets regenerated. That is why when we go here, we can type jump, right? Otherwise we wouldn't be able to say gameplay.jump. We would have a gameplay maybe, but .jump wouldn't be there. Okay. And pretty much that's it. Let's see how it works. Remember that jumping, the way it is structured, has the highest priority, highest than running. So for instance, I run, but I press spacebar, she jumps. So it overrides anything. Of course, if I'm not running, like now, even more so, right? That trick that I showed you before, that isJumpPressed, is a little bit of a lie, right? Because it's set to not what the input controller says, but what not grounded is set. Has the side effect that this works, right? And this is beautiful, because it means in a sense that jumping is not just pressing the button to jump, but it's about falling in a sense. And notice how the animation automatically is used appropriately. Like anywhere you fall, even if you didn't press the button, right, to jump, still she plays the animation, even if I, see? So usually when something like this happens is because you are doing something right? And once I realized that jumping really means is not the part where you press the button that you make things jump, but the part after that, in a sense, when you start falling. Even when you go up, you are going still up because of the jump, but the gravity is still any second pulling you down, right? So that's why you reach a peak and then you start going down. For the entire duration of the jump, the moment you press jump on, gravity is always there, right? Even right now, gravity is there. It's just that, of course, the ground pushes back so you don't penetrate it. And so, as you can see, it works, right? See, you can zoom, you can do anything in a zoom state. It's not just shooting that you can do, right? Jumping, sprinting, walking, it doesn't matter. You can do it everything in zoom version or not, so to say. Okay, so what is left to check? Well, as you can see, all the transition from the other three states, shoot, sprint, and move, to go to jump, they only check that isJump is true, because it's the highest priority, so nothing else matters. If jump is true, you go to jump. And of course, this is unchecked. So go to jump, true, go to jump, true, right? Now to come back is a little different. So for instance, from jumping to sprinting, of course, jumping has to be false and sprinting has to be true. Remember, sprinting is the second highest priority thing and shooting is the last. So from jumping to shooting, of course, aiming and shooting has to be true, and jumping and sprinting have to be false. And finally, to go from jumping to move, there's actually two, right? 1 and 2. Each has 3 variables. In both, jumping and sprinting have to be false, because otherwise you would go either jumping or sprinting, right? So those have to be false to go back here. But we could go to move or shoot. Now, to go to shoot, we already saw that both have to be true, right? Aiming and shooting. So that's why we split it in 2, because it's enough that one of the 2 is false, given that jump and sprinting are false, right? One of the 2 either aiming, or in the other one, shooting. Again, jumping and sprinting, both false, but one is shooting false and the other is aiming false. That's because it's enough that either one is false to know that you don't go to shoot. And because sprinting and jumping are false as well, then the only state where you can possibly go is move. And if you think about it, it all makes sense. Of course, in all of these cases, no matter what, it's always uncheck this, right? The only one where it's checked is the first one, because we want the animation for the spawning to complete. All right, so that's pretty much it. I think there may have been also this, that in the previous video maybe it was single, now it's double. Again, same thing. Either aiming or shooting has to be is enough that they are false, and of course jumping and sprinting as well, for shooting, to get out of shooting, and so in this case, for instance, go to move. Other than that, that's it. It's really not very different than sprinting. In fact, you can argue that jumping is, in a sense, the easiest, because it's the highest priority, so you don't have to check anything else. And pretty much that's it. So we look at all the code, right? This is for input input controller, avatar controller. We have to add this one, right, and this. And for character, just the jump speed. And so the most remarkable thing is this line, right, that really says if you're not grounded, you are jumping, basically. And the only time where we really check the input controllers whether we are jumping when we are grounded, and then it becomes not grounded by definition. And because it becomes not grounded, starting from the next frame, this is true, because not false is true, so isJumping is true. That means whether we are jumping because we press the jumping button, or we are jumping because, for instance, we are falling from a high altitude, still we are not grounded either way, so we are jumping. Again, I didn't change the name of the variable isJumpPressed for similarity with the others, but maybe, I don't know, if you want you could change it to something like is not grounded, or is jumping, or is flying, you know, something else. First, to be systematic, I just kept it the same. Probably I should change it. I'll leave it as an exercise to you. But other than that, this should be a decent implementation of how to jump. Oh yeah, wait, okay, I know. One thing that I forgot to mention is this. You go here, jumping, there are like so many different parts to jumping, right? We only use one. This is the takeoff. This is the going up second, peak, starting to going down completely, and then landing. So I used, between these three, I used the one in the middle, that is this one. So we don't use all of these animation, just this one, right? And it works pretty well because Unity does this blending, right? So she doesn't go from walking, for instance, and then falling to be like this, right? You can really see that uniformly she raises their arms. That's because Unity does blending, right? For instance, I don't know, take this. See that it does blending between, for instance, in this case, move and jumping. So that's why you don't see the arms going from here to here all at once, but it moves smoothly like this. That is great. It means basically you need only one to be cheap, like we are. And of course, if you want to be implemented in such a way as multiple frames of animation at different positions, you can. It's probably not trivial because jumping, it turns out, is one of the most difficult things you can do in a game, in a 3D game at least. Maybe 2D games are really just a touch easier. But anyway, this is a good foundation, and this is what you need, right? So remember to select this goes down to, that is what we use. You can choose another one, of course. I suggest one of the going down ones are best, more than the going up ones, but again, it's up to you. These are the ones you should check, because fundamentally you want to bake everything. And that's it. So, yes, I hope you enjoyed this, and thank you.